Hello, everyone, and good evening. My name is Ben Gondres, and I am the Dome Theater Manager at the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery. And it's my pleasure to once again welcome you to another installment of Discovery Live Ask a Scientist. If you have not joined us for this program before, this is a really fun program where we have brought together some scientists from some different fields so that you can ask them all of your burning science questions. So tonight we've got a couple of engineers from our very own Colorado State University going to be joining us here in just a moment. And then right after them at about 5:30, we are going to bring on our two chemists, and you can ask them any of your burning chemistry questions. Hopefully they aren't actually burning. But yeah, sorry, that was a bad joke. So with that said, let's go ahead and bring on our first two guests for the evening. And don't forget, if you do have a question for our experts tonight, feel free to leave those in the comments down below, and I will relay those questions to our guests. So let's go ahead and bring our guests on. Hello, we have Nicole here and Erin, and actually let's switch up the layout here. Welcome back to the show, Nicole.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, and welcome to the show for the first time, Erin.
Hi.
Hey, it's great to have you both. So yeah, why don't we just start off with a little introduction. Just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing in engineering, and maybe a little bit about how you got there. Nicole, you're to my this side. Why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Yeah. So I'm Nicole. I'm a civil engineer. I currently work in the construction management department here at Colorado State University. I teach, and my specialty is pavements. So definitely pavements and construction materials. So my focus is a lot more on like the material side as opposed to a lot of, I guess, the nitty gritty of construction. I've done research in concrete, asphalt, basic construction materials, and that kind of work. I guess I got into it just because I really liked concrete. I loved concrete when I took it in undergrad, and then I just kept chasing it through grad school and wherever I was able to get funding. It just made me wind up in pavements, basically, because the state always needs to fix their pavements.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like a lot of our world these days is made up of concrete and pavement and those types of materials. So it's always good to be, which I'm guessing is what you're doing, kind of looking to the future about those materials and how we can improve them and make them not fail so often, perhaps, and all of that kind of stuff. So awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Nicole. And Erin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for us?
Sure. My name is Erin Arneson. I'm also at the construction management department at Colorado State. I kind of took the long route into civil engineering. So I started as an architect and then as a construction manager, and then finally got an advanced degree in civil engineering. I just knew I liked buildings and how things go together. And my research, I look at physical infrastructure, especially after disasters, so how we can build things better, improve the rebuilding process, and then also kind of the social side of our built infrastructure, how it impacts people and their behavior.
Awesome. That all sounds very interesting. And, I think there's definitely going to be some topics that we're going to hit on tonight, perhaps about recovery from wildfires or tornadoes or floods, all that kind of stuff. So that'll be really fun to talk about. So why don't we start off with just an easy thing, I guess. And you can both answer this. What makes you the most excited about the fields that you're in, civil engineering and kind of the built environment around us?
I'll go ahead. I think two things for me. One is just, especially on the civil side and then, construction, is that we can really see what we do everywhere, which that gets me really excited. I mean, I love that I can teach my students and say things like, you've all seen a sidewalk, and just start talking, or we can just walk outside and point things out. So I love how practical it is. I love that I can talk to people about it. I'm surprised about the conversations I get in with people where they ask me questions about their driveway. I love that, I don't have to. Obviously, sometimes when you get higher up in research, people have no idea what you're doing. And I love that most people can understand what I'm talking about. And honestly, I just think the material side is just so interesting, just the problem solving side, like I said, and that there's a big future in it. Like you were saying earlier, Ben, we're really coming on a golden age, I think, of infrastructure repair and maintenance, which doesn't sound that glamorous, but I think is true. And So just to kind of be at the beginning of that and think about using materials like, more responsibly and, fixing things more selectively. There's a lot of learning left to do. And I think that's really exciting. So.
Yeah, I would add to that, our infrastructure needs a lot of work in the U.S. The American Society of Civil Engineers, right? They rate our infrastructure every year, and they're giving us like a D+. So we're not doing very well. But there's a lot of opportunity there then to not only just, okay, we're going to rebuild roads and bridges, but the impacts that has on people's daily lives. It shortens their commutes, could be more environmentally friendly, all of those other impacts that infrastructure can have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely one of those things that, we don't think about every day. We drive on the roads, but we don't necessarily think about exactly all of the design and the materials considerations and all of the different sciences that go into making these types of things sustainably. So that's really exciting. Speaking of sustainability, Nicole, you said that's kind of your area of focus. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the maybe new practices that might be in place as far as sustainability is concerned, or things that people might not know about?
Sure. And, especially I look a lot at concrete, sustainable. So I'm going to speak this within the lens of looking at concrete as a building material, because concrete is basically our most common widespread building material in the world, basically. But it is terrible. It's terrible for the environment. Every ton of Portland cement, which is the gray binding powder in our concrete, produces, for every ton we produce of cement, we produce 1 ton of CO2 gets released in that process. So it's terrible. And so honestly, and there's certainly some very interesting and kind of cutting edge, cool ways that people are trying to make concrete more sustainable. But what's interesting is there's a lot of very practical applications that can make concrete more sustainable as well. Because like I was saying, of the concrete mixture, and this is true in materials, basically, there's as long as we use less of the cement, and honestly across structures, as long as we're using less of that material, so right. Designing more efficiently. Concrete mix side, we're trying to use recycled materials. Basically, most components of concrete can actually be used recycled. We still need to use some component of Portland cement, but we're able to use things like fly ash that come out of coal-fired plants to supplement some of our cementitious material. So trying to use some of that. On the asphalt side, we can use fully recycled asphalt for up to 30% of that new material. Some of the recycled aggregates. But like I said, there's definitely some subtle ways too. And I think what's interesting is now we're looking at a lot of systemic things. So maybe not on paper, maybe it sounds great to use a crushed up old concrete as aggregate and new concrete. But if we have to truck that in all the way from Maine here in Colorado, actually maybe using a original source much closer to us is a better choice. So trying to find that balance, even though, like I said, some things maybe seem great on paper. I think honestly, some of the best things, and this is the least glamorous answer, but especially on the concrete, the best thing that we can do for sustainability is just build things to last longer. So constructing it properly the first time around. I know in concrete we see in time and time again, especially on pavements and sidewalks and surfaces where that surface is going to start deteriorating. A lot of times there's a couple of things that usually go into that, construction practices and whatever, and you have to start repairing that immediately. And so if you can even build it better the first time, even if it's maybe less sustainable on paper, but then you're hands off for 30 years, that's definitely a big improvement. So increasing that efficiency, I think is a big part of making concrete more sustainable right now.
Excellent. Thank you. And it looks like we have our first audience question, so we'll just go ahead and go to that real quick. Adam would like to know, is smart grid technology still on the horizon? Can you guys speak to that at all?
I'll take a stab at it.
Sure.
I would say yes, but we're really far behind other countries, right? There's just not the same political and financial pressure to make that happen. Some other countries have, my favorite example is Denmark. They're trying to go as a country carbon neutral and using smart grid technology to kind of move around power sources and things from wind turbines and water. And they're trying to do that, I think, by 2025, and they're already 80% there. So when you see some countries making such big progress in our country, which obviously is a much bigger grid, which makes it more difficult. But I think it's possible. And I think it just kind of needs a little bit more push for it to happen, including from private companies. There has to be some kind of financial side where people finally realize that would actually maybe make their bills a little cheaper if we could have an initial 5-year investment, something like that.
Cool. Awesome. Looks like we've got another audience question here. And Sierra would like to know, what are some of the more sustainable housing choices?
I'm going to have to go with that first.
Okay, yeah. So it's this is where it gets tricky, right? Like the word sustainability and what that means in building materials, right? So and there's a big debate, like in woods, on whether or not we want to consider woods a sustainable material, and a lot of that comes down to source as well, and like how they're actually. I mean, we know this, right? There's like a sustainable way to use wood products, like we're using responsible forestry practices, because in that sense, it actually is renewable. And so say you have like fully, wood framing in your house, that can be relatively sustainable. It's, I think honestly, one of the best things to do for your houses is just like I said before with pavements is like looking at that long lasting scenario. So even again,
right.
Like let's say, and I'm just going to bring it back to wood because that wood framing is going to be a big part of our residential structures, right? So, and I'm talking standard, I guess, if you want to talk about like really lofty, interesting, sustainable things that are maybe cost prohibitive to most people. But if we're a regular person and our house is mostly framed with wood, again, we can have that really sustainably forested wood, but say, and we run into some problems with wood with like the way that it's coated too for what we need to protect it against moisture, insects, fire, because wood is fire, catches fire. And so, those chemicals tend to be pretty non-sustainable, but at the same point, like again, they could last quite a lot longer. What we run into, especially with the housing construction now, is things are really not built for the kind of time frame that we were seeing in housing construction like 100 years ago, basically. And so every time that you have to fix something or build something new, you're just adding to that carbon footprint, right? So when we talk about like housing carbon footprint, right, we could say, what's that immediate construction versus like the lifetime of that house? And that's like an important consideration to look at in building construction. If you're talking about like immediate construction, I mean, for housing, a lot of things that are prefabricated, I think, are going to really help you reduce that carbon footprint tremendously. And that's just because, and across materials, we have better quality control. Again, a big part of, and I don't know the exact numbers, I'm not sure if you do, Erin, in terms of the building, carbon footprint and construction, basically what percentage is from just the materials versus like the construction itself, the mobilizing, the labor, the equipment. So when we really, but I think it's almost like, it's more on the side of the equipment as opposed to just like the materials in a lot of cases. And so to be able to reduce that, like the actual, again, idling machines, level of equipment, if we're not taking up that amount of time, that's actually doing all those things on site. If we're using prefabricated pieces, I think a lot of people maybe don't want to hear that, like a prefab house, basically, that is, but again, if we prefabricated pieces, whether those are concrete or like steel pieces or anything, is going to give you a big foot forward on sustainable residential housing construction for sure.
Yeah. I'll just jump in too. I feel like some of the social side pushes that, where I think about, housing costs in Northern Colorado and how it's so difficult for people at the entry level to get in the housing market. So there's a big demand for cheaper housing, and generally those cheaper costs come from cheaper building strategies. So houses that aren't built as well as they could be. But otherwise people are priced out of the market. So it's a very, you want people to be able to own their own home, but not have it be poor quality construction. And if it lasts longer, that in of itself would be more sustainable if it's going to last 100 years. Yeah.
It really seems like that longevity of the structure and the infrastructure is what really contributes to the sustainability of of whatever it is that you're building. So yeah, awesome. Well, and it's good to hear too that some of the technological advances in some of these prefabrication elements are actually beneficial in some manner as well. So that's awesome. I do want to talk a little bit about the disaster recovery side of things, since that is, your area of expertise, Erin. And I was listening to a podcast a little bit ago talking about the wildfires and, the fact that some of these communities that are affected by the wildfires, the instinct is just to rebuild again in the same exact way as whatever was destroyed before. But I understand that is maybe not the best case scenario, and maybe making changes to our building techniques and building in some of that resiliency to our communities that are abutting these natural areas might be a better approach. Is that something that you agree with? And can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I see over and over again, and it's not any particular disaster type. It's anyone whose home was lost, wanting to build back almost exactly what they had. And maybe that's a sense of familiarity. I'm not sure. And usually what they had, there's a reason the house didn't withstand the disaster. And so it could be better able to handle wind or flooding, things like that. Most of those improvements cost more. And then does your insurance cover the additional cost, or does your insurance only pay to help build back to the quality you had before? So it kind of comes down to a financial crunch. And sometimes there's also the policy side there. So there was one community that I studied where they had a tornado come through. And a lot of people went to their basements for shelter, and that's how they survived. A huge portion of the housing was just demolished by this F5 tornado. And then afterwards, they're trying to rebuild their houses. Everyone wanted a basement, and FEMA had to break the bad news that they're actually also in a historical floodplain. And so if they build a basement, now their house is more likely to flood. So they can't build a basement. And I think it kind of stunned people. So they have to pay extra to build some kind of shelter. So there's a lot of crisscrossing issues happening with insurance, wanting to move back in as soon as possible, and then more and more disasters happening in the same location. Yeah.
So what are some things that you might be looking at to build these more resilient communities?
So we've been trying to look at what are the most cost-effective options where you get the most value in terms of kind of resilience to a disaster per dollar. One example is kind of around Oklahoma City in the Moore, Oklahoma area. They had 3 tornadoes in less than 10 years, major tornadoes. So they're the only city in the US that has a tornado building code now, because they just decided as a city that they were going to force people to build back a little better. And there can be some really simple fixes, you put a brace on your garage door. A brace is about $400, and it makes it about half as likely for your garage. A tornado, basically, if it can get inside your garage through the garage door, it will then implode your house from the inside.
Oh, wow.
So you could spend less than $1,000 on your 2-car garage and make your house much more likely to withstand tornado winds. So trying to look at things like that, really cheap options that have a big bang for the buck.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. That's all very interesting stuff to kind of think about. I had no idea that the garage door in and of itself was so susceptible to to that kind of damage. It's the flimsiest part of the house. I guess when you think about it, when you think about it, it really is. Awesome. Let's see. So we've got another audience question here, and Adam is asking about nuclear power. I don't know if this is a long comment, so I don't know how it's going to show up. Okay, it showed up on screen. Do you think that nuclear power is a viable bridge between fossil fuel power, and renewable power? And how would you change public opinion if you do support nuclear power? So first off, do you guys support nuclear power as an option?
I definitely think it. I think it has a lot of. It definitely had. It has so much more potential than what we're realizing right now, and I think it did. And then obviously it had big dip because of public perception. And I mean, not just because of public perception, obviously, like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and these things that happened within like a pretty close time frame that definitely decreased the popularity of opinion. Rightfully so. I mean, yeah, it was a tremendous safety, issue that I think when preventable safety issues, and unfortunately that tarnished how people perceive nuclear. I mean, until now, I mean, it's still, I can't remember the number, and maybe Erin, I want to say it's like, I can't remember the percentage of our current grid that's actually off of nuclear versus what it could, or what it was, I think, at the peak in the United States. But, and it's certainly been used successfully, or as a much higher rate in other countries. So I would agree with Erin that I'm sort of on, yes, but I understand the hesitancy and the public perception currently. I don't want to add anything to that before we...
Yeah, that just seems to be a global issue, right? So like after Fukushima, I think every country is trying to reanalyze what their nuclear plan is, and are they capable of implementing the correct level of safety to utilize it effectively? Because I think it can be totally safe and effective, but it requires a lot of training and safety. And I don't think that we've been living up to that quite as much as we need to guarantee that there won't be major meltdown or issue. I think it's obviously improved since the 70s. But I think communicating that to the public as well is another challenge. And we have decreased the amount that we're using in like the last 10 years, which I don't know is necessarily a positive thing, right? We want cleaner energy if possible.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess, do you see nuclear energy as Adam was kind of saying, as a bridge between moving from fossil fuel powers to more renewable sources? Or do you think the jump is just going to be from fossil fuel sources to renewable sources at some point, however long down the line? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's hard to imagine it jumping in that capacity, especially, I mean, obviously, one of the issues we have too with some of the renewables that people propose, and then given the limitations we have on storage for that energy, is that we have like a curve, obviously, that dips tremendously based on, again, if you're looking at solar, would we have no sun? And if you're looking at wind, would we have no wind? And so these very hydroelectric, right, when those things aren't, we don't have that constant energy that we really need, that constant electricity, but nuclear really steps up and provides that. So in that sense, I think it could actually supplement really well, because it's hard to imagine without some huge upgrade happening really quickly in the way that we store renewable energy, because that's a big stopping block. I mean, in terms of, again, not just batteries, but the way that we're actually using the grid with those renewables. Because like when we have really good sun is not when we need the most energy. And so
True.
To help supplement that a lot. And it's hard for me to imagine we're ever going to be just like flip the switch, right? This is going to be a process in phases. And but I do think in that specific sense that nuclear energy is stable over time, that it can really help tremendously, especially in those like night hours or hours where we have, or to pick up when, again, you might have like very variable renewable energy in your system.
I think it actually already is the bridge, and we're just kind of catching up to that fact. The advances in the, like, especially like wind turbines, just in the past 5 years is really hard to even conceive. One wind turbine crew can put up like 100 turbines in a summer. And so these rural communities all over the Midwest that 5 years ago had no wind turbines, a single county might have 1,000 now. And so they are rapidly trying to transition, at least on the wind turbine side. I see that a lot. And so that as a supplement, they can only do that because there's enough energy in the grid. We've only been able to decrease the nuclear because it's coming from somewhere else, and it's not automatically switching back to like a coal plant to make up that difference. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's see. I had a question in my head, and then I was so engrossed in what you guys were talking about, I may have lost it. I think it had something to do with dams, though. Dams and civil engineering. That's a thing, right? No. Let me try to formulate this into a question. I mean, reservoirs are kind of the largest energy storage device that we have. Is that correct? Are you guys?
Yeah. So you're cutting out a little bit, just FYI.
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think reservoirs, dams.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Energy storage in reservoirs. Yeah. Can you speak a little bit about how that works and what that might look like for anyone who is not familiar? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll
Just
jump
making
in.
sure.
I think there's a lot of opportunity there, but same with some other power sources we've already discussed. There have been some kind of high-profile failures recently. And so the challenges of making those stable enough that they can, even after a torrential rain, not give way and be useful for the next 30, 50 years, that kind of planning has to get reassessed. A lot of the existing dams, right, that we've seen where maybe they're just earthen dams, they're starting to fail because we just weren't anticipating the climate fluctuations they'd have to deal with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think as a way to, in any way when we can use water as an energy source is usually very clean and can be a local power source in a lot of places.
Yeah. Cool. We've just got a couple minutes left, so why don't we just end our time together by, if you guys have any advice for anyone who might want to get into civil engineering, perhaps a high school student is watching or something like that, just any words of advice or encouragement you would have for someone like that. Go for it. Go ahead,
I'll
Nicole.
jump in.
Okay, go ahead, Erin.
Yeah, I would just say that whatever your perception of civil engineering is, that's not even half of it, right? I always thought a civil engineer had to be like really awesome at math, and I wasn't. And so that wasn't what I should go into. But civil engineering can be, do you like math and statistics and physical infrastructure, or do you like helping people and the people side, the social side of how people interact with infrastructure? It can be kind of anything you want to do with it. If you're interested in problem solving, that's kind of enough for you to find some niche in civil engineering.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Erin. I love the way that you said that. It's like you're just the tip of the iceberg with what we see. Every time I see civil engineering somewhere, it's always somebody in a hard hat on a bridge. And that's like, I mean, I haven't even been on that many bridge construction projects myself, right? It's like, just to, I would say keep your options open. I mean, keep doing math and science. If you're in that age range where you'd be making those choices, I mean, don't limit yourself. But, like Erin was saying, I think honestly, especially since people are so accessible now, feel free to reach out to people as well. Like what Erin was saying too, and I think that's what's kind of great here in our construction department is that there is a big part that surprises me about how much that like human element is involved in some of these like psychological and social like factors that go into construction that I think a lot of people kind of aren't always cognizant of. So again, I think the more people that that are kind of in the field or the more experiences you have, I mean, either get out there and chat with people or just like start building stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I know. I always liked building with the Legos, and that seems like a good entry point as well. So
Definitely.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you both, Erin and Nicole, for joining us on the program tonight. And it was really a pleasure to get to chat with you and get to ask you some fun engineering questions. And yeah, I hope you guys have a good rest of your evening, and perhaps will join us here on Discovery Live once again in the future at some point. Awesome.
All right.
Bye, guys.
You.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And for everyone else watching out there, don't go anywhere just yet. We do have our next two guests coming up here in just a moment. We've got two chemists, again, from CSU. So we'll go ahead and welcome them on now. And we'll welcome Allison, and Anna. Hey, welcome. Welcome back, Allison.
Thanks. It's good to be back.
Awesome. Yeah, good to have you again. And welcome to the program, Anna.
Hi. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
My
of
cat
course.
is joining me temporarily, so we'll see how long
That is Totally fine. Yep. I've got two, and I'm surprised they aren't here bothering me as well. So, cool. So you guys are both chemists and, or chemical scientists, I guess. And if you would just give us a brief introduction about yourself, a little bit about your background and what it is that you do in chemistry, and how you got to this point as well. And that would be awesome. So Allison, you're over to my, oh, I pointed the wrong way, to this side. So why don't you go ahead and start us off?
So, as Ben said, I'm Allison. I started getting interested in chemistry in my 10th grade chemistry class, and I really just loved mixing things together and seeing what would happen. So when I went to college, I was like, yeah, I'll try majoring in chemistry, and it's been 11 years since then, so clearly it's stuck. Specifically, I study solid state materials, so that's anything like memory storage in computers, coatings on cell phones, battery materials, solar cells, pretty much anything solid that you're running a current through is something that I've studied at least to some extent. And specifically, I did my PhD on battery materials.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Allison. And Anna, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I also got into chemistry in 10th grade. I had, maybe it was 11th, I don't know, some point in high school. I had a really great teacher. I had a really fun time. But actually, when I started college, I entered the physics program ultimately because the professors were funnier than the chemist professors. So,
that sounds like a valid reason to go to a specific program. Yeah.
So I did physics, and I also took way too many math classes, so I ended up double majoring in applied math as well. And then I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I was really concerned about air pollution. I'm from the other side of the mountains, Ogden, Utah, and there are like two mountain ranges that run and kind of create a basin, and during the winter we'll have periods where all the air pollutants are trapped and the air quality is really, really bad. So I was concerned about that. So my physics professor that I was working with recommended I try out atmospheric science, which I'd never heard of. So I came here for this atmospheric science program for my PhD and worked on atmospheric chemistry. So thinking about emissions of compounds into the atmosphere and how they might change. And now in my postdoc, I'm still at CSU, now in the chemistry department, and I'm thinking about the same questions, but inside. So indoors environments.
Awesome. Well, it's so good to have you both here. I think we're going to get some interesting conversation going here in just a little bit. And just to remind everyone watching, if you are watching and you do have a question for these two chemists, you can leave those questions in the comments down below and I will relay them and we'll get some good answers for you. So why don't we start out as kind of a transition from the last segment. We were talking a little bit about energy storage and that type of thing, and you said your focus was batteries, Anna, and so Allison, sorry, and so why don't you tell us a little bit about exactly what it is that you study as far as batteries, and where are the big advancements in battery technology that we're seeing these days?
Yeah, so today is the day the Nobel Prize in Chemistry is announced. And this year it's about CRISPR, which is an amazing technology. But last year it was actually John Goodenough and Stan Whittingham, who solid state chemists have been pushing for years to get a Nobel Prize. And they won it on the lithium ion battery. And that's really a technology that you guys are all very familiar with. There's lithium ion battery is great. And I don't want to be on here being like lithium ion is bad, because it is phenomenal. There are some things about it that are less than excellent. So one of those things is if you have on the anode side, you can't just use lithium metal. You have to use carbon mixed with lithium. And so it's really not as energy dense as it could be. So we are looking at alternative chemistries to try to increase how much energy is in a battery. And to you, the consumer, that means how long does my battery last until it dies? So it's a very important metric. We're also worried about safety issues. Obviously, you'll remember the Samsung phones exploding a couple of years ago. So trying to find less combustible battery materials is also good.
Yeah, safety is very important. We don't want exploding things in our pockets. That just sounds bad. Awesome. Well, that all sounds super exciting. So it sounds like we're trying to advance the safety, like we just mentioned, of these devices and batteries, but also the energy density. So that's, I guess, how much energy you can pack into a specific physical space. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there's like two measures. One is like energy per gram, so how much energy for how much the battery weighs, and that's important for transportation. If you have to move the battery in your car, then you care about that. And the other is per volume, and that's more important for like grid storage, where you have to put this battery in a building somewhere, and on the scales that you are storing energy for the electrical grid for the public, you actually care about space a lot more.
Yeah. So I'm just curious if you know, are Tesla cars and like the Tesla home batteries, are those using lithium ion
Those are lithium
technology?
ion batteries.
Okay, cool. Hopefully they don't explode. That would be bad.
No, it's rare what happened with Samsung, but you know, in a perfect world, it would be never happening. Right.
Yes. Awesome. Well, we've got a question from the audience here, and this is actually a question that I was going to ask as well. So, Anna, you said you are studying air quality indoors, and I think reading a little bit of your background, specifically, you're looking at cleaning products and that type of thing. So Laurel would like to know what your thoughts are about cleaning products we use in our homes and how that might affect us.
Yeah, definitely. So my group and several other people have looked extensively at different types of cleaning products, and essentially bleach and that type of cleaning products can emit not only harm compounds that are not necessarily great for your health, but also emits oxidants. So the reason why we might care about oxidants is that they will react with the other compounds that have been emitted and change them into something else. So I actually have a group member who just came out with some work showing that some of those secondary products from chemistry are possibly unpleasant to breathe in. So I'm working on a field campaign that looked at a number of different cleaning products, and just kind of as like a rule of thumb, I would say something like a nice natural cleaning product like Mrs. Meyer's tends to be pretty benign in terms of emissions, and that's 100% what I would recommend, assuming you're not in a situation where you need to sterilize things. And in the times of COVID, I know we're all quite concerned about surfaces and everything, but COVID is easily killed by just simple soap and water. So again, just a natural cleaning product will take care of any problems that you might be concerned about. You really don't need to dump bleach on everything. Is kind of my thing I would like everyone to remember.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. And I think a lot of us use different chemicals and cleaning products. What are some recommendations that you might have to protect ourselves from whatever harmful effects that they might have on us? Like if we are using a bleach-based product or something like that, what should we be doing to be safe?
If the air quality outside is nice, which unfortunately the last 2 months it has not been because of our wildfires here in Fort Collins, open up your windows, let your space ventilate as much as possible. If you're cleaning in the bathroom, flip on the fan in the bathroom. So more ventilation is better, and outdoor air usually is a good idea because usually we have great air quality here. If you have access to like an N95 mask, that can help, but I think it's not super necessary. And the thing is, like, I say that there's unpleasant compounds, but they're usually not being emitted at concentrations that if you're only cleaning with these products, once in a while, it's not a problem. You shouldn't be concerned. Like, these have been tested, but if you are an occupation that requires you to be cleaning with bleach all of the time, trying to get better ventilation is your number one friend.
Yeah. I'm just going to ask you a question. Have you heard of stabilized aqueous ozone?
No.
Okay. Well, then we won't get into it.
Is that from like air cleaners or?
It's a cleaning agent. So basically use high voltage to impregnate ozone into water. And that works as a cleaning agent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I haven't heard of that, but I will give my other spiel, which is if you are buying air purifiers for your home, that's fantastic. Get a HEPA filter. don't get something that creates ozone in your home, because that ozone is just going to react with other compounds and make products you don't necessarily want in your home. So just a straightforward HEPA filter is great.
That's interesting. I didn't even think about that. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, in addition to indoor air quality, I think you have a background in just general air pollution as well. So I did want to talk a little bit about the wildfire smoke, and just about maybe the air quality warnings that all of us might be getting on our phones, through our weather apps and that kind of thing. Can you tell us a little bit about those air quality alerts and what we should be concerned about, or maybe not as concerned about when we're looking at things like that?
Yeah, definitely. I would say so. I've been monitoring the air quality pretty obsessively because that's how I am. And so it kind of fluctuates throughout the day. If you walk outside and it looks hazy, it's probably not great. If you walk outside and you smell smoke, that's also another indication. Fun fact, when you smell smoke, it means that the smoke is pretty fresh, because those compounds that create the scent can sort of react away over time. So if we're getting smoke in from California, we're not really going to smell any smoke, but we'll still see the haze.
Interesting.
For the most part, the air quality has been in the moderate to unhealthy for sensitive levels. So if you know the colors, so green is the best, and then moderate is yellow, and unhealthy for sensitive groups is orange. So those sensitive groups are really very young people, because their lungs are still really developing, and the elderly. And then it goes into kind of unhealthy when pretty much everybody should try to limit outdoor activity. But if you went for a jog and you're 25 and the air quality is moderate, you're probably going to be okay. It's also very individual, though. So if you have asthma, you might find your asthma flares up when the air quality is really bad. So I think what's more important than the air quality alerts is just to monitor how you feel. And if your eyes itch and your nose is running and you don't feel great, try to go indoors when you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that over the past little bit, I've been out biking every now and then, and even if I can't smell the smoke, sometimes I realize that it's smoky because my throat starts to kind of burn. I might get a little headache. I don't know what. Can you tell me a little bit about why I might be having some of those effects?
So there's a lot of.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of aerosols. Tiny, tiny particles. And that's what the haze is coming from.
Okay.
And it's epidemiology and health effects is really hard. And I'm kind of dancing in that realm very lightly right now.
Yeah.
But essentially, you're inhaling these things that are just irritants, and they can deposit in different portions of your body depending how large they are. So if they're big particles, they'll kind of deposit in your head, and usually like your nose will filter them out. If they're smaller, they can get further and further and further, and they can have compounds on them that then react with you have fluids lining everything, trying to keep you safe. So like they're basically like oxidizing a little bit inside of you, so reacting. And so that's really where the irritation comes from. You're getting really low level inflammation, or if you're being exposed to high concentrations, you're getting higher levels of inflammation.
Interesting. Yeah, that actually helps explain that quite a bit. So thank you. Thanks for dancing in that realm a little bit. Awesome. Well, switching gears a little bit, Allison, I think you mentioned that one of the areas that you may have looked at were cell phone coatings as kind of a materials science. And so I was wondering if that applied to like the screen surface or... Yeah.
So one of the
Tell me a little bit about that. Yeah.
One of the interesting things that you need to have for a cell phone is you have to both be able to see through it, but if it's a touch screen, you need to have electrons flowing through it as well.
Yes.
And sort of, there's the basic chemistry rules that if you gave that to a Gen Chem student, they'd be like, no, this can't happen. And it has to do with band structure and all these things. So you have to play tricks with the structure. So typically what we use is called ITO, which stands for indium doped tin oxide. And that's on pretty much all of your cell phone screens. But indium is very rare, and so it's very expensive. So if we can find some sort of like an indium-free substitute for this material, it will be good, and your cell phone will be $5 cheaper. But we won't go through the world supply of indium, which is also important. I use a lot of the periodic table, like the whole periodic table, and you always have to be worried about resource management when you're doing that, because some elements are rarer than others. And so if you put a rare element into a device that everyone wants, you've got a supply problem. So just trying to diversify what elements we can use for what application.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, we use these things every single day, but thinking about what actually makes them work, from, touching the surface of the glass screen to that becoming, a signal that the cell phone can then interpret into interaction with it. That's crazy. I had no idea that there was so much chemistry involved in that process. One thing I'm also curious about, and you may not have any, this is just a random Ben question, but a lot of these cell phone surfaces are also, I think, either made with a special type of glass or coated with a special coating to resist things like fingerprints or scratches or anything like that. Is that something that you can speak to a little bit? How is that process happening?
My guess is that is a plastic, which means it's primarily a carbon-based material. I don't know that for a fact. But the good news about the glass screen is you only need the bottom to conduct electricity, and you can put whatever you want on the top as long as it's transparent. You just have to have a layer that can conduct signals away from your finger. So. Okay,
awesome. Great. Well, let's just throw a general question out there, I guess. What is the most interesting thing that you guys have kind of encountered, maybe in a lab setting or something like that, something that maybe surprised you a little bit in working with chemistry?
So I feel like every time you take any sort of data, you're sort of holding your breath, because you want it to be what you expect it to be, and sometimes you have a success metric you're looking for and a failure metric, and then sometimes you get something you weren't expecting at all, and that's always really exciting. So, for example, I just ran a reaction, and I took it out and I put it in an electron microscope so I can look at what things look like on the micrometer scale. And I made these particles that have giant holes in them, and very symmetric, very smooth holes. I was not expecting that at all. And now I'm very excited about that. So just sort of anytime something is unexpected in a good way in a lab, it's the exciting moments.
Yeah. How about you, Anna? Any fun things?
Yeah, sure. So this is kind of more broad, but so my background was outdoor air pollution, and then I moved into indoor air pollution this year, and I was honestly quite surprised by there's so much messaging and effort put onto outdoor air quality. A lot of the EPA standards are for outdoor air quality, and yet our indoor spaces can sometimes have really high concentrations of pollution, and there's very little messaging about that. And this statistic kind of staggers me every time. But we spend about 90% of our time indoors during normal times. So the fact that everything is being focused on outdoors, and if you show health effects, they're usually being correlated to outdoors in developed nations like the United States, and yet the indoors can be not the best place. Was very surprising to me. So it's good because it's encouraging me to try to take a little bit more of a policy bent to some of my work, and thinking about what sorts of what does a perfect world look like, and what steps can be taken towards getting towards, because if all of our houses had really amazing rapid air cycling, and all that air was going through really heavy duty filters, our air quality would be really good inside. I live in a condo. I lived in this condo for 6 years. I don't even think it has a filter. It certainly does not have a hood or the stove. There's nothing. I got nothing. And, I don't live in the worst place, but I would like something to already exist. I want it to be in the regulations so I don't have to think about it, and normal people don't have to think about it, and they don't have to wonder why their kid has asthma. There's a lot of problems coming from the indoors that just, the messaging is just not out there yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a problem in atmospheric labs, but in labs I've worked in, you put a rubber band on the lab bench, and within 3 days it doesn't stretch anymore because there's just stuff in the air that gets into the rubber and degrades it.
That's so interesting. Is there's a lot of ozone? Because I know ozone like destroys rubber.
You know, you're welcome to come to our lab and test. We've done that. But it's just like, well, I'm inhaling this every day for, you know.
Yeah. No, it's kind of disturbing.
Yeah. Interesting. I didn't even, again, that's another one of those considerations of chemistry in kind of our everyday lives that I just haven't really thought about before. So now I'm going to start thinking about my air quality indoors. I mean, we do have a lot of, as you can probably see, houseplants, which I understand houseplants can contribute to kind of purifying the air. Is that correct?
That's a common misconception that I definitely totally held until like 2 months ago.
Darn it. Okay.
They don't really do anything.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately. But they do look nice and they're good for mental health. So
there you go. They're keeping me
unfortunately,
company.
what does work costs money, like portable air filters, good filters in your homes. So again, like this shouldn't be a burden on everyone. This should just be like written into the code.
Yeah.
Everything that we're buying. For people in the audience, if you do have a stove hood, I know it's loud, I know it's annoying, but if it vents to the outdoors, use it. If it vents back into your house, don't bother.
That's good. Yeah. I think every place that I've lived, it doesn't vent outdoors. So I never really quite understood the purpose of that.
It's quite uncommon, unfortunately.
Interesting. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears quite a bit because I just remembered another topic that I really wanted to talk about. And hopefully you guys might have some insight into this, but maybe not. I don't know. It's a little bit out there per se. But I run our dome planetarium, so I like space. And of course, one of the interesting atmospheric chemistry stories to come out recently was the phosphine gas in Venus's atmosphere. Can you guys talk a little bit about that discovery and maybe what it might mean? I understand it could either be coming from a biological process, perhaps, or maybe an unknown chemical process. So I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look into that too much, but any insights on that story?
I certainly saw the Venus trending on Twitter. I'm gonna just go ahead and say right now, I live in the troposphere, which is the bottom layer of our atmosphere, and I don't really have any thoughts on it. Cool. It seemed very interesting, but I didn't really dig in further.
So I did, my cursory Wikipedia search, so this is very academic. But one thing I learned is that the atmosphere of Venus is like 98% carbon dioxide, as opposed to the atmosphere here on Earth. If the atmospheric chemist is going to correct me, but it's about 80% nitrogen, 20% oxygen, and 1% other stuff. And so it's like all of my chemical intuition as to like what can and can't happen in air doesn't work on Venus because the environment is carbon dioxide. So there are certainly very talented chemists that are looking at these signals and figuring out exactly what gas it could be and what pathways there are. And I'm going to let them do their job, and I will read their findings and go, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I guess one interesting tie perhaps, and this is a question for you guys, we learn about a lot of these other planets and even exoplanets about their atmospheres through spectroscopy, and so I'm guessing we do much the same with our own atmosphere. Sometimes we use perhaps spectroscopy to learn about what the composition of our atmosphere is and that kind of thing. Is that true? Am I making a correct assumption?
So there are a number of satellites that circling either geostationary, so they track in one place, or they circle around the globe. They're taking a number of measurements. So this is, for instance, how we know our CO2 burden globally. And I am not an instrument person, so I may be lying, but I'm almost positive that's all spectroscopy. And then there are, when we measure, like on the grounds, some instruments are spectroscopic and others are different.
Yeah.
So one advantage we have with Earth's atmosphere is we can just grab a jar of it.
It's right here.
Yeah. And you can't really do that in Pluto. So we'll have a lot of, satellites that are tuned to space, and they're looking at, I believe it's microwave frequencies, seeing how fast the atoms and the molecules on those planets are rotating, and then going, okay, on Earth, we know that sort of rotation corresponds to this molecule, and you sort of, you can pattern match that way. But on Earth, you can also do chemical measurements, how fast does the air react with this versus that, and get information that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting how we are learning about the universe by comparing it to what's happening here on Earth. And I guess that's our really only basis of understanding and knowledge is what we can find out about our own atmosphere and our own planet as well. So, yeah.
Well,
awesome. Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
The nice thing about the universe is it's atoms. It's the same sort of atoms that we have on Earth. Are all over until you get to these things called neutron stars, which maybe as an astronomer you know about.
Yes.
And those things break me as a chemist.
Right, they are so weird.
You have neutrons and you have protons, and they have electrons spinning around them, and that is my entire view of matter. A neutron star is like the size of a star with no electrons and no protons, and that breaks me a little as a chemist.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we've just got a few minutes left, so you may have heard my closing question for the last pair of scientists we had. But for anyone out there watching and who might be interested in getting into chemistry, whether it's materials science or atmospheric science, what advice or words of encouragement would you give to that person? Let's say we've got a high school student watching, and they're thinking about their kind of career path. So yeah, go for it.
Do you want to go first?
So, you can go.
Okay. I would say that I was surprised when I got the email asking me to be on this, because I don't consider myself to be a chemist. I don't work in a lab. I don't like mixing chemicals and pipetting and things like that. I work with data. I work with numbers. I work on a computer. I like to code. I like to program. So I think the previous speakers kind of spoke to this as well, that the field is not the narrow slice that you might think it is based on some stereotypes. It's a really broad field, and I think there's something for everyone. And also, things are really interdisciplinary, so I don't really deal with things that are alive, but once in a while, something that's kind of alive floats past my realm, and I do a lot of physics still. So it's fun, and if you think you don't like chemistry, maybe look around a little wider and see what else falls under the chemistry umbrella.
That's great advice. How about you, Allison?
I mean, I agree with that totally. I have chemist friends that they shoot lasers at things all day, and that's their day. And I have chemist friends that are in a lab for 12 hours straight, and they love it. And me, I'll go into a lab. I'm not that different from a baker. I'll go in, I'll mix something, I'll throw it in a furnace, which is essentially an oven, and I'll leave, and I'll come back the next day and take it out. And so chemistry is such a broad field, and it's worth sticking through the intro classes. Chemistry intro classes get sort of this undeserved reputation for being, very stringent. But once you get past the basics and you start seeing how it all connects, it's really a beautiful field. So I would encourage anyone who likes science to look into it.
Excellent. Well, those were amazing words of advice and encouragement. Thank you both for all of that. And thank you for being on the program tonight and answering all of my really strange off-the-wall questions. Hopefully you guys had fun. And hopefully we'll see you back on the program at some point soon, or at the museum maybe. But yeah, hopefully, hope you guys have a good evening, and we'll see you next time. Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. And for everyone out there watching, thank you all for tuning in tonight for the program. Hopefully you had fun and maybe even learned some new things. If you did enjoy tonight's program, please do consider making a donation to the Museum of Discovery. We are a nonprofit organization, and we do rely on your generous support to continue to bring these types of programs to you. If you're on Facebook Live, you can use the little donate button down below to make a quick donation of any amount that you want, or you can visit our website at fcmod.org/donate and do that there. And once again, I hope you enjoyed the program, and I hope you join us in the future for our other programs. I am still doing our astronomy night skies updates bi-weekly. We're kind of alternating this program and the night sky program. So stay tuned to our Facebook page for updates about that. All right. We'll see you guys all next time. Have a great night, everyone.